Hello, in this presentation we will talk about the accounting program and some ideas that the accounting team has had in order to increase the pass rate. Objectives will be to define a dynamic in the accounting schedule that should always be kept in mind when making changes and optimize material covered to fit the new improved schedule, which now has two prerequisites, which was a recent change. And so to put this in context, want to look at what has happened over time to the accounting schedule and how much material is covered in the courses, and then what we currently have, and then ideas for changes towards the future. So this is using the current account names, but this is to reflect the accounting material covered at one point in the past. So in the past, we used a Cengage textbook, which was equivalent in many, almost exactly equivalent to this book that we are currently using, which is a McGraw-Hill textbook. So in the past, we basically used the same type of textbook, and we had a prereqs between this and this and this, and this is the managerial class. We basically took the material in that textbook, divided it evenly. So we took all the chapters in this textbook, we divided it evenly through our fundamental classes, and then we had the number of chapters being 5, 5, 6, and 6. This is just a rough estimate of what we had in the past at one time. Actually, in the past at one time, we even had AC 1110 only covering 4 chapters. But we had a pretty even distribution based on the major text that we were using, which is equivalent to the text that we are currently using in McGraw-Hill. We then, at this point in time, this distribution of material now looks like this currently. The accounting 1110 has 10 chapters, then it goes down to 8 chapters, then it goes down to 6 chapters, and then we went to a whole new book over here, even though for some reason this book covers the same material as this book. And in so doing, the colored areas represent the fact that we have duplicated information, such as payroll being covered here. It's the exact same chapters being covered here. And we have an entire payroll class over here that we're also teaching that goes in more depth than both of these. We also have duplicated information between these two, a lot of duplicated information between these two classes. So the question is, why do we have this uneven distribution here? Why is AC 1110 all front-loaded with 10 chapters, and then we reduce it down to 8 and 6? And then why did we go to a different book? Is there an explanation of why we went from something that looks like this to this? Is there some way that we can go back to something similar from this to that? And based on new changes, basically in the prerequisite, I think there is a way to go from here back to something that's looking more evenly distributed through the same number of classes that we currently have. So in order to talk about that, just want to give an overview of the dynamic that's been the problem since kind of the inception of the accounting program. And it's a dynamic in every program, but it's probably bigger in the accounting program, and we need to keep it in mind anytime we make scheduling changes and add classes and add or subtract content. And that I'm going to call the epic stream in the accounting scheduling. And so we have the educational ideal. From an educational standpoint in accounting, in a perfect world, we would like to teach the accounting classes linearly, such as we would teach math classes, meaning we're going to teach addition before multiplication. We would like to have all classes have prerequisites in the whole accounting curriculum. But of course that's not practical from a logistics point of view, because if we did so, we'd have too few students, the schedule wouldn't work, we would have too few students to support the program. But ideally, from an educational standpoint, a complete linear program would be the ideal. From a scheduling standpoint, of course, we have the complete opposite. From a scheduling point of view, we want to have 0 prerequisites because that would maximize class. But of course, once again, from a practical standpoint, we can't have 0 prerequisites because the retention would go way down. We would be doing students a disservice because they wouldn't be able to learn material that was completely, out of order, and therefore we would have a high dropout rate and low retention rates. So we need to find the happy medium between these two, and that's what we've been doing throughout the years here. And at one point in time, we had 5 prerequisites just in the certificate program. Up until recently, down to 1 prerequisite in the program, and then very recently we have now moved it up to 2 prerequisites. That's a huge benefit to the educational ideal to have 2 prerequisites rather than just 1, but it would only be a benefit if we can change the current schedule, which has been structured in order to accommodate 1 prerequisite, and change the content back to a schedule that now would accommodate the new change which is now having 2 prerequisites. So let me explain what we mean. Here's once again the current schedule that we have. In AC 1110, that's the one, our one prerequisite in the past. Now we have AC 1110, and then in Mod B, the second mod that every student takes, they're going to take AC 1160. We now have 2 prerequisites, therefore we don't have the issue of why did we front load everything into AC 1110 when it used to only cover 4 chapters. Most likely because we thought we needed to touch on all of these different type of topics in order for this to be the prereq for any other class that a student would then take. Meaning, under the prior method, students could take AC 1110 and then jump all the way to managerial accounting, which in a traditional accounting program would probably be the last class that individuals would take, and there could be like 4 to 5 prereqs before they make that jump from here to here. So in order to do that, we touched on all this information. Now, that means that we're covering what we used to cover, this many chapters, and now we're covering 10 chapters. Now, some people might say, well, 10 chapters, that's not that much information. I've seen other classes with 10 chapters, and therefore, that's not too bad. But let me put that into context with other classes and say why that is an immense amount of information. And to put it into context, we can compare it to like the business law class here, that is another very large book that we spend a lot of time on. Chapter 1 of that book has 20 pages in it. Chapter 1 of the accounting textbook has 50 pages in it. So these chapters are very long chapters. That's like 2.5 times the amount of material in the accounting book as in the law book. Therefore, 10 chapters is more like 25 chapters. On top of that, I just want to point out that when we talk about something like business law or just about any other topic, people might not know definitions in business. In law, people might not know the way to write a brief, but students do know how to look up definitions in Google, and students do have an opinion and can easily form an opinion about law. So, and they also have a very good familiarity with the medium in which the work will be turned in, which will either be a Microsoft Word document or some other form of text document. Unlike the accounting program, where although students have worked with numbers, they have never worked with a formal debit and credit the way we're going to use debits and credits. To say someone knows math and therefore should know accounting and debits and credits is like saying someone knows how to listen to music and therefore should be able to easily write sheet music. Well, if they've never seen how sheet music is written, that is a completely new concept. Although people have seen financial statements, they've never worked with debits and credits and the rules for debits and credits. Completely new concept. Therefore, it's going to take more time. Also, the medium in which it is turned in, well, I don't care if it's using Connect or not, it's either going to be a database program or a spreadsheet of some kind, either Excel or a database program. No matter how you format that, it's going to be turned in such a way that the students are not used to that medium of turning things in. Therefore, when we're talking about 10 chapters, we're really talking about an equivalent of like 25 chapters in other books on top of the medium and form in which something is turned in being very different in accounting classes, which is why most programs really concentrate on these concepts, chapters 1 through 4, in the first class. Also want to point out that this Accounting 1110 also affects a lot of programs outside of accounting because it's really the only class that other programs take either in their AA or bachelor's program. So if we keep it at 10 chapters, it's really a monster to people that are not in the accounting field because they will end up taking this class only. So how can we make this distribution? Well, we know that we don't have the prereq problem because these two are the prereqs. So how can we then distribute this more evenly? Mainly, we can eliminate this chapter because this chapter is covered in payroll. Also, there's something happened in this dynamic, and I'm just going to take a guess as to what happened over here. Once again, we used to have a book that covered all of this, and it's the equivalent of this book. Before we moved to this book in McGraw-Hill, I think we were going to try to move away from Cengage and or go bookless at one time for some reason, and maybe the idea was that we were going to chisel away at it by taking away the managerial, and then maybe the plan was to take away this and that. That's my assumption as to maybe what the reasoning was. But when we did that, what happened is this used to be a prereq for this, and I think in order to teach these topics, the second managerial accounting topics, we couldn't do it because this was no longer a prereq to this. So therefore, we had to end up teaching the same topics here, and this class basically got adjusted to where we're teaching much the same stuff, It's a different book, much the same stuff. These chapters aren't as long. This is actually a larger class than this, but there's still way too much material covered in this, and there's a lot of duplicated material between here and here. And if there's anything that should not be duplicated in a certificate program for accounting, it's really the managerial stuff, because most people are going to be working in the accounting department in the preparation of the financial statements, and the posting of data, that is covered here in chapters 1 through 4. So we should really be concentrating here and not doubling up the managerial accounting. Therefore, since these are much the same topics as these, and this book covers everything, and it would be a lot easier if we just used one book, I think we should remove these topics altogether, which basically are very similar, so we wouldn't have to change the class name or anything. Move these chapters over to here so that we have one textbook. Then just all we have to do is simply even out these chapters between these three classes. If we did that, then we can move back from something like this to something like this, where we use one textbook, we have uniformity, conformity between all of it, we have an even number of classes so that when people take accounting 1110, they don't feel like it's overwhelmed and the whole program is going to be including 10 chapters in the whole program. We can have just an even distribution. Remember that these classes are 2.5 times longer than most other classes, so this is very much still quite a substantial amount of material to take a look at. In doing that, we wouldn't have to change the names of the classes, we wouldn't have to really add any other classes if we did a distribution such as this.